Okay, here we are. Well, to those of you that know me, you already know I'm a massive gearhead. So I figured I may as well start my first video by doing a bit of a rig rundown of my current pedal board. So I guess before I start, I should say that I'm just playing a Lone Star Strat, which is a single humbucker 2016 model Stratocaster, fairly low output pickups, into a Victory DP40, which is basically a V40 with a slightly brighter reverb in it. So I'll give you the core sound. So straight into the DP40. This is with the gain, preamp gain on about 10 o'clock, the master volume on about 10 o'clock, and we're in the low wattage mode. So all the switches are up, where voice 1 is up, the mid kick is off, trebles at about 2 o'clock, mid's just under halfway, bass is at about 10 o'clock. So that's on the neck pickup, sort of just on the edge of breakup. If I flick it on the bridge pickup, a little bit of hair on there. So what I'll normally do is just leave the reverb on, and it's a really long reverb, really long decay. There's nothing, you can't adjust it, so that's it. It's more of a plate style reverb, I guess, than a tube reverb. But once you're playing and everything else is going on, it tends to sit back, so it doesn't get in the way of the attack of your notes. So it's pretty good. I'm liking it so far. In actual fact, the Wampler reflection that's on the board there doesn't get turned on, so it might even get taken off the board. So that's that. So the board itself, I just fell in love with because of the just the simplicity of the design. So it's a Voodoo Labs product. The board's called a Dingbat. It's a medium-sized Dingbat. They asked me where they got that name from, but and the looper here, which is a PX8 Plus, actually screws straight onto that lip across the front of the board there. So the looper itself is twice, or maybe not quite twice, but it's at least another 15mm wider than what you see hanging out the bottom, exposed out the bottom here where the switches are. So, and most switches are, a bit wider than what you're seeing there. So by having it sit under that lip, you're gaining that extra space on your pedal board compared to if you had a normal pedal board arrangement where the looper was sitting up on top there. So that's really fantastic. The other thing is it is made to mount the Voodoo Labs power supplies underneath. You can see the IEC cable coming out the back there. All the cutouts are there. So this has got the Mondo in it, which I think is 13 isolated outputs with a toroidal transformer. But there's actually room for another one under there if you needed that many outlets, which I guess some people do. So besides that, all the cables on there are Evidence Audio screw-in solderless cables. I tried the George L's in the past, which I never had much luck with. I got lots of bad connections. I was probably doing something wrong saying that, but these Evidence Audio ones are pretty foolproof. So pretty happy with them. They've got a sound of their own. They're very clinical, very I was used to old normal guitar cables with probably a high capacitance compared to some of the more expensive cables you can get now. So I was used to not having that top end in there, and probably turning up the top end on the amp to make up for it, which is a sound in itself. That's Stevie and Jimmy and everybody that we loved, that's what they would have been doing. They would have been losing all that top end in their cables and possibly through the setups on their pedals, and then cranking those amps and cranking the top end, and the fact that you've got that probably low output pickups on guitars back then, going into this amp as quite a dark sound, and then you're pushing the amp. It's a sound of its own. So this is a whole different thing. It's like hearing a buffer for the first time. You make allowances for it, and at first it was really weird, and I must admit I didn't like it, but now I've gotten used to it. There's a clarity to it, and I can hear the difference between the overdrives a lot more, and at the moment I'm digging it. Besides that, there's a couple of Gig Rig virtual batteries underneath there, which are set at about halfway, which I think is around 6-7 volts sort of thing. So even when they're set all the way up on full voltage, they make a difference, and it's to do with the impedance, if I understand correctly, of the power supply, and the way that interacts with the pedal. So they're at the moment on the Vemuram and the OCD. So when I tried it with all these pedals, there was only 3 that I could really hear a dramatic difference, and it was those 2 and the MXR booster. But I've only got 2 of them, so. Alright, so from there, basically the first thing we come into is the Phase 90. But before we start testing these things, I should probably mention that what I've been doing is I got the Les Paul out for the first time in a while, and it just kicks this thing. It sounds fantastic. But then when I jump back on the Strat, I'm like, oh wow, where's all my volume gone? I just felt really wimpy. So I ended up putting the booster on, and what I discovered was, with the booster on, the volume between with the Strat with the booster on and the Les Paul with the booster off, they're pretty much back on a level playing field again. So this is with the Strat with the booster off. And if I put the booster on, so it really thickens. This is basically an old MXR micro amp circuit, which was a big white pedal with a single knob, in a smaller enclosure with a tone knob on it, and their new EP booster circuit in the front of it. So the MXR micro amp was a really one-to-one linear boost pedal. Basically, you didn't get any extra top end or less top end or more bottom or anything. It was just a straight up, what I'd consider a clean boost. This guy here fattens things. So but there's that fattening effect. There's another trim pod inside for the gain, where you control the gain on the EP boost, which I've got just slightly on. And you'll probably notice that the tone pot, which is the one on the right, is all the way up. So with that down, I'm tipping this is a pretty dark sort of booster pedal, but with it up, I think the top end, if I go to the bridge pickup, is basically retains the top end. Pretty nicely, so that's how I've got that set. So as soon as I've got the Strat, I'm going to leave that on, and I'll run you through these pedals. So yeah, classic Phase 90, which for me is really only gets used for Floyd Dark Side of the Moon sort of stuff, you know. so it doesn't get a lot of use. The similar thing with the MXR Micro Chorus, which is the next one in the circuit. I'm a big Stone Temple Pilots fan, so it sort of comes into play with the for that sort of stuff, which I'm tipping he was probably had one of those Roland units in the studio, the Dimension units, was possibly what was getting used on a lot of that pilot stuff. So next pedal in the chain is, well, the next two are probably next two, sorry. So Supro's the next one in the chain, then the D&M drive, and then the Vemuram. Now these two, the Supro and the Vemuram, are probably my favourites at the moment. So the Supro is a harmonic tremolo, which is something new to me. It sounds a bit like a Vibe, and it's got a I was going to say a 1-to-1 isolation transformer in it. I'm not 100% sure it is 1-to-1. I'm tipping it is. And what that does is it adds a bit of saturation there and simulates the tremolo circuit in a Supro amplifier pushing the power section. So this is what it sounds like. And if I turn that drives on about a quarter of the way there, so that's off. If I bring it up, there's actually a fair bit of drive there. So really, really lovely tremolo sound, and because of that saturation for that transformer, it's in front of the drive pedals. So normally I would have had a tremolo after the drive pedals and before the delays, so it doesn't cut the repeats off, which other people might like, but with this one here, basically with the way I use these drive pedals to boost into each other, if I had that Supro pedal further down in the chain, the saturation in it itself is going to, basically it's already clipping, so when I put the boost pedals into it, I'm not going to get that volume boost, I'm just going to get more clipping out of the Supro. So having it at the front allows the boosters after it to still give everything a lift like it normally would, and it actually sounds fantastic at the front. A lot of tremolos, I think at the front you'll lose a bit of that tremolo effect going into the drives. It can sound a bit strange, but this one sounds fantastic. So the next one in line is a D&M drive, but seeing as I run that into the Vemuram for a boost, we'll jump across to the Vemuram. So I'll go on the neck pickup. It's just an awesome edge of breakup sound, and probably push it a little bit more. Now if you turn it up, it does drive. which is pretty great in itself. But I find if I leave it around here, what it does is it's sitting on the edge of breakup. Now if I push that with the D&M drive, or the mix side of the D&M drive, it's going to get that gain just like as if I turn the gain pot up on the Vemure amp, because I'm pushing the input. So and if I want to turn the level up, I'm going to get more because I'm pushing the input of the Vemure amp even harder. So this, if I turn it off, you can hear mix side of the D&M drive. Yeah, the neck pickup. So it's real pushed in the mids, but it's more upper mids to my ear than a tube screamer, which actually helps it have more presence in the mix. Like a tube screamer sort of circuit will stand out in the mix, but if you sometimes you need that bit of top end to get above cymbals and things like that. So I think it's a really great circuit. So it's my understanding is it's based on a Klon sort of style circuit, and it's a germanium boost. So that's pretty cool. It's extremely touch sensitive too. And it cleans up great. So that's a D&M drive. I should also mention I've got only two modifications I've done to this Longbuild Strat. I put a treble bleed circuit in there myself so I can turn the volume down and clean up without losing the top end. And the chap I bought it off has put locking tuners on it. So rightio. So mix side, I don't tend to use a lot. Occasionally the OCD, which is my main sort of heavy rock drive sound. If that's not vibing in the room, then I can give the D&M drive a try, but most of the time the OCD is pretty cool. So Vemure amp is normally always on. Yeah, so that's normally the core sound, is the booster on and the Vemure amp on, which is a new thing to me because never really had an always on pedal until I heard the Vemure amp, and I just love it. Just it makes everything going into it or after it seem to sound better. It just gives it that sort of full stack, sort of driven edge of breakup sort of thing, and the EQ response on it is just, yeah, it just puts it right in that. It makes me think of a full stack. So with the OCD, which a lot of you probably already know this pedal, this is a GE version, which is a germanium transistor. I previously had the Throwback overdrive boost on my board for a long time, which I absolutely love. And the thing with that one was it was very sensitive to temperature. With the germanium transistors, as some of you may already know, they are susceptible to the temperature, so they'll sound different depending on where you put them. You know, there's always stories about certain guys putting their fuzz faces in the freezer and all this sort of thing because, yeah, they don't like the heat too much. So when I heard a demo on YouTube for this OCD, I instantly recognised a sound that was familiar to me from the Throwback overdrive booster. So whether it's a germanium thing, because that's what they've both got in common, but there was just this sound that was it's just really reminiscent of that pedal, and I thought, geez, maybe it's worth giving one of these a crack. I've never had an OCD. They've got a great reputation. Everybody seems to love them. So if it's got the same vibe, maybe it's more stable. And turns out this thing doesn't seem to care what the room temperature is. So yeah, let's replace the overdrive boost. And it sounds something like this. Now if I turn off the Vemiram, this is where we're at. So yeah, love it with it on. It's the same with the mix side of the D&M drive. It seems to sound better with the Vemiram on. Clean sound, get into a bit of something heavier. Come across to the lead, and instead of this, right, next one is the Wampler. So the Wampler Velvet Fuzz. Now, I did make some notes here. So what I love about this is, the bloom. The front of the note seems to have this bloom to it. Now, I've always loved the bloom that a certain fuzz pedal adds to the front of a note. I always think of Gilmour, the solo in Time. That the bloom he gets when he comes in on that F sharp. But so there's that, and the good ones clean up really nicely. But I've never liked that sputtery, gated sort of dying battery thing, or all the issues that come along with the impedance. Some of the old classic circuits, trouble running them in front of wahs and different places in the pedal chain and that sort of thing. So this guy here is exactly what Brian says. It's the fuzz pedal for people that don't like fuzz pedals. It seems to be a bit of a love or hate pedal for some reason. Guys either like it or they just don't want a bar of it. I love it. It's got a toggle switch for a big and tight position. The tight position is basically more like a sort of high gain overdrive, and the big position gives you more of that fuzz, and it gives you that bloom. So I leave it in the big position, and it sounds like this. So yeah, you can hear that. Single notes are just, you know, huge. I do like it for a bit of Lenny. So that's pretty cool too. Next is the Analog Man delay. Now, there's not much to say about this. It's, in my opinion, just basically simply the best analog delay I've ever owned. It's got this controller that comes along with it. Well, it doesn't come along with it, it's actually extra, which has got modulation on the repeats, which is something you don't get with the standalone pedal. So maybe if I put it on the long repeats. It's quite subtle, because that's how I've got it set up. I like to leave it on all the time, so I've got it set up pretty subtle. But yeah, basically it gives you two different delay settings, so full settings, so level feedback and time for both, and you can switch between A and B. So A, I just got set as a short, which tends to stay on most of the time, and then yeah, B is obviously a long one, so you know you get the turn the reverb off for a moment. Really dark repeats. So yeah, that normally stays on there. The reverb back on. And that's it. That's my board. You've got the Wampler reflections there, which is out of the loop. So the boost is the last pedal in the looper, and the delay and the Wampler and the polytuner hanging off the end there. Like I said before, the reflections may or may not sort of live on. If I turn this one off, I'm going to show you how I normally sort of have it set. Would have been a similar thing to the reverb built into the DP40. And that's it. Right on 30 minutes. So if you stuck around this long, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. And if you've got any questions, please ask in the comments, and you know, hopefully I might be able to make some more videos and answer some of those questions. I can do a review on the Longboard Stratocaster, which is a pretty cool guitar. And the amps, or look, anything you guys are interested in, just chuck it in the comments, and I'll see what I can come up with. So, catch you next time.